Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens with your host, Jake. Scott is busy today, so it's just me, and we're excited to talk all things rabbit hole, Pernod Ricard. What's Kaveh up to, right? Where in the world is Kaveh? Is kind of the better way to position this. So sit back and buckle into the latest episode of the Bourbon Lens. Kaveh, thanks for joining us. It's, I think the second time we've highlighted rabbit hole many times over the years, and have always appreciated your time and energy around bourbon and whiskey. So thanks for joining us again.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's always lovely to talk to you guys.
Well, excited to dive in. You got a lot of things happening, and you're a mover and a shaker, right? It's like you can't sit still for too long. There's always something, whether it's, unique barrel finishing or side projects or diving deeper into Pernod Ricard. And that's kind of where I really want to start. Earlier this year, they made an announcement, and I think it kind of like sat in a press release, and not many people picked up on it. I paid attention to it. You've got a new role within the organization overall. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you're going to be doing and how that changes your kind of day-to-day thought process?
Sure. Yeah. So my new role is, it's a fancy title, Chief Whiskey Officer. and I basically stepped down as the CEO of Rabbit Hole as of a couple of months ago, and stepped into this role as the Chief Whiskey Officer. This is in part related to a longstanding vision and effort to try to set up and establish Louisville as the hub for American whiskey for Pernod Ricard. As you know, we have four kind of bourbon rye brands, Jefferson, Rabbit Hole, TX, and Smooth Ambler, as well as flavored whiskey as well with Screwball. And North American Distilling is the organization that has been formed that's going to be based out of Louisville with a new organizational structure. And my role is the Chief Whiskey Officer for this group.
Yeah, that's exciting. Have you been able to go and see all the different distilleries at this point and all the kind of portfolio? And Texas whiskey is a lot different than what's happening in downtown Louisville and what's happening at Smooth Ambler even. So, as you kind of sit into the modern distilling that you all have created and the architectural beauty that is Rabbit Hole, right? What's it like going to Texas and trying that, or going to Smooth Ambler and trying what, they've done in kind of a partnership with, Source Product to create a really nice whiskey base, and then obviously distilling some of their own stuff, because the Founder Series Smooth Ambler stuff is just chef's kiss good. Like, those guys know what they're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I have. So the short answer is, yeah, I've had a chance to actually go out and visit various sites and talk to the team members there, as well as the founders. You mentioned Smooth Ambler, John Little, spectacular, not only a whiskey maker, but great fellow and colleague. So I've had a chance to visit everybody. Really, my job, and in some ways, is to essentially just come in to try to assist and help and showcase these products and help the various sites and the various whiskey makers to keep doing what they're doing and build on it, particularly when it comes to innovation.
Yeah.
Because I think that, as you pointed out, Texas, West Virginia, Kentucky, we're talking about different regions. And one of the things that's really exciting for me personally is, how do we support these distilleries and these team members to be able to lean into what is truly their regional terroir expression, and to be able to create these whiskeys that are a reflection of the region.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty cool. And that's something I think overall, America is definitely figuring out, or trying to figure out. I mean, it's not going to be like Scotland, where there's defined things, and they're starting to even break, kind of what they traditionally do is there's peated single malt and non Isla places, right? And I think that's what's going to be uniquely American is there'll be different things that pop up, but it'll be about the grain, and it'll be about heirloom grain. I think is something that's going to be super interesting, moving forward, or the type of grain that's used, like in different varietals, and that kind of leads me into something before we hit our crescendo. Is you have, the Mary Dowling line that you've kind of put a lot of love in to, and you have this new Mary Dowling winter wheat bourbon that's out finished in toasted barrels. I was telling you prior to, I've enjoyed it a few nights. It's a really lovely whiskey, but you've been able to play with different finishes, different expressions of varietals in there. Like, what's it like to you to be able to play with different expressions of grain and different barrel types to elevate the end consumer's palate and profile of what they would think whiskey is?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting things for me personally when it comes to the category. American whiskey, I think, is defined in a way that gives us a lot of room for creativity and a lot of flexibility within the guardrails that what constitutes, let's say, bourbon. But my mantra has been with bourbon: 51% corn, 49% possibility.
Yeah.
And is really kind of the approach that we've taken as far as seeing how we can look at various types of grains to be able to organically create some beautiful whiskey expressions that are building on the spectacular high rise and the wheated bourbons that we have. And I think that's where, for me personally, taking a page out of the craft beer movement and what those guys have done from a creativity and innovation standpoint has been a springboard to be able to do the same thing with Rabbit Hole, Mary Dowling, and obviously being able to hopefully contribute to the other brands as well to take that same sensibility and keep innovating and producing some interesting things.
Yeah. So one thing that I've always appreciated, especially a lot of people don't realize this about like Derringer, that's a wheated bourbon, right? That is just finished. And so I didn't, I don't know the mash bills or anything on this because I've looked at the press releases and tried to figure it out. Is this the same wheated recipe that's in Derringer, or is it a different wheated expression?
Yeah, it is. It is. So, one of the things that is really important for me is to create what I call complementarity, which means that within a portfolio, be it within Rabbit Hole, but more importantly, between Rabbit Hole, Mary Dowling, Jefferson, and the other brands, complementarity for me means that I want to make sure that each of the expressions that we put out is genuinely distinct. So no two expressions are copying each other, right? So Rabbit Hole, for example, is not going to release a wheated bourbon. We have the wheated base that's been used for Derringer, and it's obviously finished in PX sherry cask. But I wanted to really, for various reasons, put the wheated bourbon for Mary Dowling.
Yeah.
And that's essentially there. So when you come to the distillery here at Rabbit Hole, as an example, now we have a flight of basically wheated. Well, takes you from you're going to start with the Mary Dowling wheated, and then you can taste the double oak. You can taste the various finishes that we have with the wheated. Obviously, the Derringer flight. You can have the Derringer single barrel and the Derringer founders. So you can see the progression of what is possible within even one particular recipe, going from base all the way to a more higher aged products.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. And that's one thing I've like kind of long stood on is that you all have a very unique wheated recipe. And when all of that kind of came out and kind of came to mind, like, and being able to taste this expression kind of in its raw form, right? Toasted barrel is not going to do a ton. It's going to elevate some things, but I think getting a more raw expression of the wheated really kind of shows people that you all know what you're doing. It doesn't matter if it is high rye bourbon, if it is rye whiskey, or is it wheated bourbon. I think that's what's really unique is you've been able to put out a lot of product, whether it's through contract when you got started or, what you all have been able to produce out of the Louisville-based distillery. It's pretty cool to see how all that has come together and people are getting to try that, nationwide and probably worldwide at this point.
Yeah, we're in 12, actually going on 14 international markets now. So slowly we're getting our feet wet in terms of the export market. And it's really exciting to see other countries begin to discover bourbon, discover Rabbit Hole, and to be able to get a sense of what we're doing. I think it's really bright days ahead if we continue to produce excellent whiskey that could go head to head with other great world whiskeys and begin to introduce American whiskey to a larger audience.
Well, yeah, and that's one thing, we didn't talk about this in the pre-show, but the love that Cave Hill has gotten and how uniquely Louisville that whiskey is, right? I think you talk about kind of planting a flag here for, what Pernod's doing in the makeup of the new organization. Cave Hill can really be a flagship to that because it is uniquely Louisville. I mean, some of the most famous people to ever walk the city are buried in that cemetery. And it's been really cool to see that expression just become an award-winning stacker. It just has taken off year over year. It seems like it does well at San Francisco or New York or whatever the main competition is. What's it like to have your workhorse kind of be just regarded as a highly known and sought after whiskey?
It's exciting. It's thrilling to see what is a non-traditional recipe get a lot of attention and get a lot of love. And I think, what you pointed out is exactly what the intention was, which is vis-a-vis through the great whiskey that we produce to be able to tell the story of our community as well. So Cave Hill Cemetery, obviously resting place of some of the greats that came before us. And this is, to me, part of what's really exciting, which is about what we're doing, which is not just making whiskey. We make great whiskey, but also use that whiskey as a way of being able to bring people together and tell our story.
Yeah.
And it's been really wonderful to see folks take a little sip of the dram and then be able to listen to the story and learn more about Louisville history and what Louisville has been when it comes to its contribution to our category.
Yeah, no, and that's we talk about Bardstown obviously like as being like one of the epicenters, but Louisville is, that's where all the trade was happening, right? It sat on the water. It's where people brought their whiskey to sell it, right? And that waterway is, vitally important. And you saw Owensboro down in New Orleans and everything in between kind of live off that whiskey trade. And it's really cool. The investment, not only you all are making as an organization, but, the entire bourbon community is recognizing Louisville for what it is. And I think that's really cool because you all are at the center of a lot of everything because you're right in the middle of Nulu. You're just in a part to understand everything that's happening. And I think that's a really great space to be in, especially as the bourbon, boom continues to boom.
Yeah. Yeah. It's Nulu sits right between downtown and some of the oldest neighborhoods in Louisville, like Cherokee Park and Crescent Hill. And it's a connecting point for me. And it's a really, again, lovely way to bring new folks that are coming into the fold, visiting the city, but also the residents of town coming in. And, this has become really a congregation point. And like you said, Louisville was the center of trade. I mean, right down the street on Main Street, at one point we had back in the day over 200 different types of businesses, everyone from suppliers to distributors and all kinds of stuff in between. And there's a real rich history here that is exciting. And I think if people have not had a chance to visit, or if they come and visit, a good starting point is actually the Fraser Museum, because Fraser's got an amazing collection of historic brands, bottles.
Yeah.
And it's just a nice way to kickstart the tour and visit distilleries like Rabbit Hole and some of the other great ones that are right down the street from us.
Yeah. And it's the official start of the Bourbon Trail, right? So,
that's right.
Gotta give a shout out to the Fraser Museum for that. And one of the other things we didn't talk about, my buddy actually did some drone footage of the new overlook. It is absolutely gorgeous. I've not been up there. I was finishing construction the last time I was there. What's it like to have that space just continue to be elevated for that consumer experience, right? Because, not only are you all, doing tours and creating whiskey and all this stuff, but these are brand destinations now, right? These are places you want people to spend 2, 3, 4 hours at to get a really sense of place, right? I feel like that's been the big thing about all these distilleries is creating a sense of place. So what's it like to have that re-energized new view of one of the better kind of views of downtown Louisville overall?
It's been great. Look, to me, having a great hospitality experience is vital if you want your brand to really make an impact, right? It's almost like at this point, it's just simple table stakes to have a good hospitality experience. We're really privileged to have a space that not only is able to showcase what we do from the making side of it, but also be able to entertain in a way that's really exciting, being able to not only see downtown Louisville, but the bridges over Ohio, and be able to tell the story of New Lou and things of that nature. And I think, in a lot of ways, this is just phase one. It's been a great phase one. But going back to your early question about my new role in North American distilling, we are looking now to expand our footprint to the entire block of Jefferson over the course of the next few years. And what's exciting about that is that the recent edits, if you would, to Overlook is going to continue to expand, right? What we're looking in the next couple of years to be able to expand our hospitality, to have a single barrel experience, as well as more tasting rooms. And my favorite is a whiskey library that would also be able to give you an experience of not just Rabbit Hole, but some historic whiskeys as well, to give you a little bit of a context of where we were and where we are now.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so cool because like when you think about that, like that's really kind of how you got into it, right? Like you had the historic whiskey, you were kind of buying and collecting on your own and kind of really bootstrapped this into a thing. And the thing took off. I mean, like, do you ever take time to kind of look back in retrospect and be like, dang, we did this thing. Like we made this thing kind of happen. Like, does that ever sink in?
Oh my God, man. I mean, it's funny you say that. My wife and I actually on occasion still look at each other going, how the hell did we do this? Because, I think you've heard me say this before, but when we started, there was not a single bank in the state of Kentucky that lent money to bourbon. They just didn't really think about it as a worthwhile investment, and let alone to see it as an industry that is contributing as much as it is to the Commonwealth. So no, it's absolutely surreal where we were and where we are now, and it's just it's been phenomenal to be part of this ride.
Yeah, I mean it's so cool, like as a native Louisvillian, to see like how I'll use the phrase coined by the previous mayor, bourbonism, right? How literally bourbon has revitalized the community, and in a time and space where my former employer is kind of shrinking their footprint, Humana, and that was 13,000 people a day, but because we now have this new tourism like revitalization, and downtown is clean and nice, and you got the waterfront park, and you have what Whiskey Row is becoming, and all the other brands that are creating destinations or distilleries downtown. It's just really cool because when I grew up, downtown it was Humana, and that was about it. Like there was not much going on. And so it's so cool to be able to go down there and feel vibrance and life. And it's taken time after COVID to revitalize that even. But I feel like we're getting to a point where, man, Louisville's ripe for the picking to do a lot of really cool stuff over the next several years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, Louisville, I feel like it is definitely poised for, and now another pretty substantial phase of growth and development. I think bourbon and bourbonism, as the previous mayor called it, really gave us a nice foundation and a springboard to catapult the city to another level, brought a lot of folks to the city to discover what it is.
Yeah.
But even beyond Louisville, I think people come in and just see what Kentucky is all about. And it's eye-opening to them, particularly with all the stuff that's going on in some of the other states in the country. So Louisville and Kentucky is a pretty interesting proposition.
For sure. We do wear shoes and we do have teeth. I mean, like those things, like you can get rid of those myths. Like those are things that are false. But it's so funny because when you go outside, they're like, oh, you're from Kentucky. Like, oh, they make some crude joke and you're like, okay, great. But where do you get your whiskey from? Where do you get your bourbon from? Kentucky. Yeah. Okay, good.
Listen, I can't tell you how many friends either from Chicago or California that, initially we're like, what the hell are you doing moving to Kentucky? But invariably, over time, over the years, when they come and visit and they get it, they're like, oh shit, now I understand why you're here. And I've had a lot of people actually move out here over the last 14, 15 years, just because the lifestyle is much more conducive to a just a better experience.
Yeah. Well, I don't mind the slowness of it. And you still get the city feel with the slowness of country living to an extent here in Louisville. It's busier than it used to be, but we'll take that. We'll take all those things. So it's that time of year. It's SOND for the people who don't know what that means. September, October, November, December. It's the busiest whiskey season. It makes my head spin personally as someone who tries to consume all the information and consume a lot of the different products along the way. But you all have released or about to release your next Founder series. And it's a Boxergrail, which is your rye whiskey, which I think is phenomenal. Just the base spirit is great. But this is an 8-year, 103.8 proof. And you all have a long sensory panel, and you do a lot of different things. A lot of people get input on this to make sure it's great. But these Founders are very unique and specific, and you have a lot of say-so that kind of go into these. So tell us a little bit about this barreling in particular, and why people should look out for this release that's about to hit market.
Yeah, I think one of the things that probably, if your audience doesn't know about Rabbit Hole, is that there are no shortcuts, no compromise, and what I say, nothing left to chance. It's a true craft artisanal approach to the whiskey, and I think the Founders Collection, that series has to be not only embody that, but at least several notches above, in the sense that you're talking about. These are collector whiskeys. These are whiskeys that are for the folks that genuinely want to sip and savor and have the desire to let their palate really just have a full-on sensory experience. So I'm really excited about this release because I love our rye. I think the fact that we age it in toasted and charred barrels, all of it with Kelvin cooperage. These are barrels that are they use actually wood fire rather than gas to toast and char it. It's just from the barrel all the way to the liquid to the grains, everything is just super dialed in, and it's a fantastic pour, and I just highly recommend it. It's more pricey, so it's not for everybody. But I think if you happen to be in that category of looking for an exceptional pour, that it is truly a limited release. This is it. This is the one that I would certainly recommend.
Yeah, it is. It does carry a bigger price point, but not only does it carry a bigger price point, but it also comes with a really slick box. The packaging's beautiful, the bottle's beautiful. Those are the things that those elevate the experience. So when you pop open the magnetic, or I don't know what this one is, if it's got a hinge, but you've had some magnetic ones in the past and some really just great things. This allows for that experiential tasting to happen as well. And I think that's something you can't look past either, is that experiential drink, that experiential sip. When you're like, hey, what's that thing up there? And you pull it down, you open it up, and then you're like, this is a special whiskey because X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I think there's something about aesthetics that, for me personally, is really important. It's a combination of things that have to come together, right? The taste has to be spectacular, but as you pointed out, also the experience has to be spectacular. So just the idea of holding that bottle, popping the cork, and being able to pour this lovely rye whiskey that has an extremely wonderful and lovely and long finish it's a joy. And I think that, again, it's not for everybody, but if you happen to be someone who really is picky about their whiskey, this is the one for you.
Yeah, this is an exceptional expression of rye whiskey. All the traditional kind of notes that you're looking for elevated in this. Really enjoying the lemon on this. I think that is sometimes citrus leans orange most of the time. I think in rye, this leans a little more lemon sour, which is great. I love that. And it's got a lot of the earthiness that you would expect from rye. So you go outside, pine or any of that's in there. But it's also balanced by nice caramels and vanillas. and your baking spices are there, your nutmeg, your clove, so it's a really well-rounded whiskey. I'm going to spend a lot more time with it other than what I just sipped here today. But I think that is a really, really well-balanced whiskey. And I think that's something that people kind of look past. They also sometimes are looking for sharp edges or, distinct things when they're picking single barrels. I think one of the best compliments you can give someone is it well-rounded? Is it well-balanced across, front, back, middle of your palate, on the nose to the finish? I think that is something as a whiskey consumer, we need to laud more. We need to celebrate more, because that's the hard thing to do. It's easy to get spikes in flavor and do different things, but to have a really nice, mature and rounded whiskey, I think is something that we overlook a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Look, it's all about balance and harmony for me. I don't like any whiskey or any spirit that punches me in the face. So the notes have to be working in harmony with each other. And that's where I think complexity comes in, and that's where the nuances come in a good expression. So I think you're absolutely right on that, and it's something that particularly with rye, I know a lot of folks chase that spiciness. I think it's what's really lovely about this is the combination of spice with the citrus, the floral, and those other notes that really come into play. That makes it a much, much, much more interesting pour.
Yeah. And that's the one thing, the 95.5 mash bill got so traditionalized, and now it's called Indiana rye. And then, you've seen the resurgence of Pennsylvania rye whiskey. And I always butcher search the name, the river. Monongahela, I think is how you say it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Then you have Empire Rye, which is New York, and you have Kentucky style rye, which is high corn. But then you have people like New Riff that do a 90-10. So there's just a lot of really cool things that happen in rye whiskey. And I think if you're chasing a particular flavor, rye might be the best way to look at terroir overall, because the mash bills are so regionalized. Right. And I think that's what's really cool about rye whiskey. And if you're not paying attention to it, you don't have to have higher proof to get all the flavors that you want. It can be at a 90, it can be at 103. And this one is warm throughout. It's warm to 2 to 3 minutes after I've had the sip. I'm feeling it. I can tell it's with me. A long lingering finish is a great way to describe this. You still get the flavor on your palate, but you can just tell you had a nice sip of whiskey, and you don't have to go right back to it. You can let that mellow. Let's see what the air does to it. I'm one of the guys, I love to have a drop of water. So I'm probably going to drop have a drop in there, see what the oils do, let it expand. And these are the types of whiskeys that you have to do that with. It's not just you're not taking shots of this. You're sitting there, you're enjoying it. And this is an expression you kind of, with an ounce or two, you try it over a cube, you try it over, some water. And I think it's a really nice, well done whiskey. And I think that's the best compliment I could pay to you is
Listen,
good job.
Man, I appreciate it. And if you ever want a job on a Century panel, let me know, because you're picking up on all the right notes.
I like to say that I've tasted a few whiskeys over time. So if you ever need a celebrity, I won't call myself a celebrity. If you ever need an enthusiast help, raise my hand. I'm not far away, right? It's Rabbit Hole's 20 minutes from the house. Everything in Louisville is 20 minutes from the house, as long as there's no traffic. That's the way I look at it. But no, this is great. Really excited about that. We talked about the Mary Dowling. For you as just kind of looking at North American whiskey, right? You got a lot in your portfolio. You got a lot of hats you wear now. This is kind of putting you on the spot, but what do you think the next 5 to 10 years of American whiskey looks like?
I think actually we're going in a little bit of a contraction phase, in my opinion. I think we are going to see winners and losers, in the sense that I think there's going to be some brands that are going to fall by the wayside. And it's not necessarily for any particular reason other than the fact that you need a lot of resources to be able to get the word out. There's just a lot of brands out there. And we went from essentially just a handful of brands to a proliferation of brands over the last 10 years alone. And now, as we all know and see it, the shelves are exploding with different types of brands on the on the shelves, and And I think that it's going to be a little tight the next few years. And I think we're going to kind of we're going into a more mature phase for American whiskey.
Yeah.
With that said, I do think the folks that have the staying power now are going to be really leaning into innovation and differentiation in a way that I think is going to be ultimately best for the consumer. Because you pointed out, that was part of the reason that I got in the business in the first place, is that, there's only so much monotony consumers can tolerate, right? There's distilleries out there that are putting some phenomenal juice, but how many brands are they supplying?
Yeah.
You can't have 100 brands basically having the same recipe coming from the same distillery. And what we're seeing is consumers waking up to that, and they're looking and asking and hoping, especially as their palate's maturing, for differentiation.
Yeah.
So the ones that have the staying power and have the creative chops, I think, are going to succeed, and the ones that are just rinsing and repeating are going to struggle.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. And we've already started to see it here in 2024. There's been a handful of brands that have had to fold, and it's never awesome to see that, right? Like, it kind of sucks, to be honest. Like, people put their hard-earned sweat equity into these things, and the shelves are getting tighter, and the consumers are going back to picking up the things that they know and they love, and they're tired of paying $100 for 4-year product. That's really kind of the crux of it. I mean, because we've all felt the financial tightness of the world in general. And so, that it sucks, but like, I think what that does is breed maturity, like you said. And, there's still growth, which is crazy. Like, even though you see companies closing, there's still growth in the market. People are like, well, it's only 2% versus the 15 during COVID. Well, people aren't bored anymore. Like, they've got life and they've got things to do. But like, if you're still seeing 1 to 2 to 3% growth, which a lot of people are seeing and projecting, like that means that people are still buying whiskey. More new people are still buying whiskey. Like that.
For sure.
That should excite people, that like we're at a plateau of the boom where it's just steady growth versus this hockey stick. And everyone's betting on international, as they should, because there's a lot of people in this world that don't know what's coming out of this great country, and better yet, what's coming out of this great state of Kentucky. And I'm excited for what that future looks like. And I think in the next 10 years, we'll probably see how the world bet on Kentucky and all the different things out of American bourbon and American whiskey that we'll see kind of play out, which I think will be really cool to see. Hey, people in pick a country are now, like, instead of Scotch, they're drinking American bourbon. Like that would be awesome to me.
It would be. No, and I'm completely with you. Look, we're stepping into a mature phase, and 2 to 3% growth is meaningful.
Yeah.
And it's, that hockey stick was essentially a reflection of the industry coming out of the doldrums and getting to where it needs to be. So there was a lot of catching up. Now that we've caught up, we're going into a little bit more of a normalized cycle, as you would with any industry. And I think, it's just a natural progression of things. And I do think that ultimately, with some of these kind of changes that are going to be happening in terms of folks that are going to stay and folks that are going to fold, consumers are ultimately going to benefit from it, both from a quality standpoint, differentiation standpoint, as well as price point.
Yeah. Well, and it's all going to come back to price, right? And there's a lot of new liquid that's going to come online over the next 5 years, especially if you look at what happened in Kentucky. Like, Pernod's no different, right? Jefferson's behemoth of a distillery is going to come online, and that's going to allow you all to create a lot of whiskey. And it's going to be really cool because production of whiskey today will allow you to have better prices and more affordable prices, along with inflation and all those things that factor into it. But everything will be a little more affordable in 4 to 5 years. You are not going to see these. I hope not, that we don't see the Scotch prices of the world, where we're paying, $25,000 for a bottle of Scotch. But you never know. There's premiumization that's going to happen, but the American consumer has been long supportive of bourbon. It seems like, and most brands, even though they're owned by world entities, have been able to keep the American consumer happy. And I think that's where we are. And, from an outsider looking in, I don't run a business. But, I think whiskey's still affordable. If you're going and buying top shelf whiskey all the time, that might not be affordable, but Rabbit Hole's in the $45 to $50 range. I mean, obviously you can go into your pricier bottles with the Derringer at $85. I think it's still a great gift bottle. One of my favorite go-to gifts that I give to people. The Mary Dowling's in the $40 to $60 range, right? So, I mean, your all's portfolio is right there. You have a premium product with Jefferson's. Smooth Ambler is very affordable. Not familiar with TX as much, but, I think that's what's good about your all's portfolio is you do have the LTOs, but your everyday products are definitely available to the average consumer when they want to pick up a bottle or they want to gift somebody something nice.
For sure. No, for sure. And I think that's a key ingredient to be able to have a nice range of products, nice range of price points, and to be able to showcase what you have for consumers at various dollar amounts.
No, I'm excited for the future of the North American distillers. I think that's be really cool to see all that come together. Excited to see how you all continue to take on Louisville as a native here, and can't wait for the next sit down, Kaveh, because I'm sure there'll be something new and exciting and something going on in the whiskey world. And glad that you're continuing to plant roots and help the city and the whiskey industry continue to grow. So really appreciate your time today. For our listeners, where can they find out more about just kind of what's happening with Pernod Ricard and North American Distillers and all the different brands going on?
Yeah, I think, our websites, all the brands' websites, I think are a great resource for products and what's going on.
Yeah.
I think, with regards to Pernod Ricard in general, a lot of the business journals kind of give updates on what's going on, be it local business journals or national ones, and actually even international ones. So there's a lot of different resources to find out. I think just stay tuned on, this new chapter for North American Distillers and Pernod Ricard, because I do think that to be able to plant a flag here in Louisville and to be able to build a company with a long-term vision is something that's really exciting. And for me, honestly, I got to pinch myself that I'm a part of it to be able to contribute not only to the brands, the company, but more importantly to Louisville, because I do want Louisville to be successful and bring more jobs and economic opportunity here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that that's the goal, because I always want my city to thrive. I never thought I'd plant roots here, as someone who grew up here, but, me and my family love it and excited to see what the next 5, 10, 15 years of growth looks like here for the city. So Kaveh, I really appreciate you being part of the Bourbon Lens family at this point. We kind of wrap all of our guests in that, and we're excited. And thank you so much for sending us the whiskey. It's been a pleasure to try, and excited for our listeners to get a chance to taste it along the way. So I appreciate it. And until next time, everybody, cheers.
I appreciate it. Cheers to you. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. Make sure you're connected with Scott and I via social media on Instagram, X, and Facebook. We'd love to connect. And if you're more the professional type, follow us over on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about Bourbon Lens, make sure you're subscribed to our weekly newsletter, The Weekly Pour. For exclusive content and more, check out Patreon. Follow us there at Bourbon Lens. And last but not least, on your favorite podcast listening app, make sure you're subscribed, because every Monday, Scott and I release a podcast, and we would love to have you here listening to the newest features and the newest whiskey news. And until next time, cheers.